to meet you, Cliff, if you're out there.
Cliff is muted. Yeah, David, we got you 5x5. You're good.
Okay.
Hey, Akil, how are you doing?
Hi, Vincent. Doing good. How about you?
Doing all right.
So I have a doubt. Have you attempted your CISSP, or are you planning to do it in future?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm planning to. It's something as many of us have studied for over the years. But no, I have not attempted it yet. I have my CC and some CompTIA certifications, but not my CISSP.
Oh, cool. So we both are at the same level, I guess. So I have my Security Plus and CYSA Plus, and also done my CC last year.
Okay. Hey, Jeremy, how are you doing?
How you guys all doing?
Doing all right.
Great.
Good.
Very well.
You guys hear that background noise too, or just my side, like distortion?
I don't hear anything on my end.
Yeah, pretty
Interesting from
clear
my side as well.
side.
I actually hear crosstalk. Okay, I'm gonna disconnect and I'll rejoin.
Okay.
Sounds good. Just to give you guys a heads up, I am recording this session on my end. I figured out a way to do it that's not inside of Google Meet, so maybe we can take portions of it for those who couldn't attend.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, you may want to bring that up when it's before you start recording, so that anyone who does not want to have their face on the recording has the opt-out opportunity.
That's a good point. I'll make sure everyone knows.
It's still good to know. How long has this group been around? Because I was looking at the members, and they expressed it's a new group.
Yes, yep. I started this group maybe 6 weeks ago or 7 weeks ago. How did you find this, Cliff?
C Square.
Oh, okay.
And I'm glad I found it.
Good. That's great. I'm happy to hear that. It seems to be pretty well received, which is awesome.
Currently, I'm studying LearnKey, and I'm also doing boot camps that I've been doing for a few years, and it's just getting more into like a study group and people. Yeah, I think this is a good thing. I appreciate you doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. It is 6:30. Hey, Chris, how are you doing? Good to see you. Hi, Tro. How do I pronounce your name? TRO.
Good, I guess.
You might be muted if you're trying to talk. And just a heads up for you too, I am recording this. So if you don't want to be recorded, you can turn off your camera and mute yourself. But just a heads up there. All right. I don't know how many more people to expect. Only a few people really responded to our comment. But this is Matthew. He's a member of our group. He and I have gotten to know each other a bit over the past few weeks. And I asked if he would be willing to kind of just do a little Q&A chat with us. He is a CISSP and digital forensic examiner. Our format has been really, really casual so far for the groups and kind of just chatting, getting to know one another. Matthew, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Sure, I'll try to keep it short.
Yeah.
30-year career, started in 1994, done a lot of crazy stuff, helped a lot of people out, and now I'm here. That's the short part of it. Went to U.S. Air Force Academy and then on to University of Kentucky, was a computer science major. I started out as a classically trained computer scientist and decided that networking was a lot more interesting. And then from networking, got into cybersecurity. My first forensic case was in 1995. I'm certified in forensics. I've testified in court cases. Forensics accounts for about a third of my work. The rest is consulting in terms of general IT, but mostly security consulting, and medium to large size businesses coming in as basically a hired gun. So I've been called in for ransomware cases. I've been called in for security assessments. I've been called in for, just everything from project management to a new building is put into place. One of the practice questions I posted up was one that I had written, and it involved an oven in a large manufacturing facility. That actually came from real life. I have a large manufacturing client, and we actually installed a very large 300-foot oven, and we had to secure it. And that was part of all that. And so that's what triggered that question that I wrote that was on there. So if any of you all saw that question or attempted to or successfully answered it, that actually came from real life. But yeah, that's kind of my background. So I've seen a lot, I've done a lot. I'm not an expert in much of anything. I don't like to be called an expert. I've been called an expert witness on the stand and in trials. It's a moniker that I'm reluctant to take on. But if having experience and having done a lot of stuff means I am one, I guess I'll wear it. But anyways, I just wanted to be here because everybody here, I'm sure, has a career. Everybody brings their own experiences and their own set of pros and cons, especially to something like CISSP. So I wanted to kind of give some idea of what to expect on the exam. If you have questions about the exam, I'm not an instructor. I am not a trainer. I work closely with another one, a guy named Ben Maliso, who does the Wanna Practice and the Wanna Be a CISSP. I'm not trying to promote his stuff, but if you have ever heard of Ben or of any of his stuff, I write some questions for him. I help out. I do his tech editing for his books on CISSP, CCSP, and SSCP. And we do a podcast together, weekly podcast on information security, InfoSec. So that's kind of where I come at some of this from. But we don't have to talk about CISSP. We can talk about anything at all. If something relates to CISSP, I'm happy to tell you. If something does not relate to CISSP and you're not going to see it on the exam, I'll tell you that as well, because there's a lot of stuff that people have questions about, especially highly technical questions that will never be on the CISSP exam. So I can kind of give you a heads up as to stuff like that as well.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, what's interesting? How many of us, there's 12 of us in here now, and just another quick disclaimer, I am recording this, so be aware of that. If you don't want your face recorded or don't want your voice recorded, just mute yourself or turn your camera off. How many people in the meeting have attempted the CISSP? I think that might give us a little temperature of the... Okay, I see Peter and David raising their hands, so 2 of you guys. Who else? And maybe throw something in the chat or raise your hand on the meeting if you have. Okay, so at least three of us.
Yep. Cool.
What was your? Oh, go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, no, I think I was going to ask the exact same thing. what were your thoughts about?
Yeah,
about
what was your experience with it?
Was it what you expected, or did it catch you completely off guard?
I would probably say it's one of the easier exams I failed. The hardest one I ever took was my VMware VCP. I went way down the rabbit hole of VMware, and that's a professional level certification. This one was way easier. So you could almost say that, I think somebody wrote this line, CISSP casts a very wide net, but it goes down maybe an inch deep in the water.
Yeah.
VMware casts not a very wide net, but it goes way down to the bottom of the sea. So that one was hard. This one, I was surprised I failed it. I walked out of there with a good confidence. When I looked at my printout, I was like, really? I didn't make 4 of the domains. So who knew?
Yeah, I had the same experience. It was embarrassing.
Really?
Yeah.
How long ago did you guys make your attempts at it?
Oh,
Oh, I did mine last November, I think, is when I tried.
last month. I did it immediately a week after the new exam came about. And the class I had that I went through, the instructor-led class, covered the older material, and he even said that I'm not covering any new material because there was no new material to be had, I guess, at the time they were transitioning. But he said you should still be fine, and I was. I mean, other than a few terms, I mean, this is just a slam against ISC too. A lot of their material was not on the test. So then that's where I think I failed. That I looked at some terminology that I was thrown at me, and I was like, okay, somebody's really inventing stuff here, because in 26 years of infrastructure, I've never heard of some of this stuff. And that's all I've been doing is infrastructure. So,
Well, and it's important to keep in mind with CISSP, there are questions that are not scored on the exam. I don't know if your instructor related that to you. There are up to 25 questions on the exam that are okay, but they're not scored, and they will have weird off-the-wall stuff. And sometimes you can pick them out because they'll have stuff that you've never heard of, that was never on the exam outline, that you were never instructed about, or anything like that.
all right.
You mean not scored, isn't it? It'll have no bearing on the score of the test. It's just a judge.
Precisely. Yeah. In other words, they're demo questions of sorts that they're kind of working out whether they want to keep them or not. And so they'll sometimes throw in technology or terminology that it's just out of left field, and it's just nothing that you've ever heard of, that you've ever seen, and you cannot possibly expect to answer it in any sort of a logical or knowledgeable way.
Right.
So when you see questions like that, it's kind of a freebie. You don't have to answer it. I mean, you have to answer it, but you don't have to answer it correctly. It's not going to have any bearing on your score.
What do you think some of the indicators are that you're coming up on one of those questions?
When you don't know the definition of the word they're asking about,
Okay.
Yeah.
because you've never heard of it.
Yeah. That can be one of them. And that's not a hard and fast rule, but that can be one of them. And as a caveat, I don't work for ISC Squared. I don't know anything about the exam and how that they write the questions other than anecdotal evidence. But they do publicly say that there are up to 25 non-scored questions on every exam that's administered.
Cliff, I see you have your hand up there.
Yeah, I'm like I expressed earlier, I'm going through LearnKey, and I had to correct them on their website because they were saying for CISSP 2015, and they said, all right, well, we're going to update all that. And I got stuff from 2021, and then when 2024 was coming out, I suggested, well, I get the new books now, right? And they're like, well, there's no change. However, if you go back to the videos, we had our SaaS, our PaaS, and our infrastructure as a service. However, being in other aspects, it's like there's so many other different cloud aspects that have had me concerned that may be on the test. And it's just like, well, here's just one little area that they're not expressing that may be on the test. And it's like, if I'm not familiar with them, I think it's almost like a setup to failure. And as far as wannabe, my boot camps were with Larry Greenblatt.
Oh yeah. Larry and Ben work together on quite a lot of projects. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but
Cool.
thoughts?
Yeah. So the exam updates that they did, so from the 21 to the 24 exam, the content of the exam largely did not change. What they changed was what domain certain content fell under. So actually, when I took mine, I was using 10-year-old study materials, and it was all the exact same stuff. It was just they reordered some of the stuff in 2020 or 2021, whenever it was that I took mine. And the same thing for 21 to 24. The concepts and the fundamentals remain the same. They do add some new cloud content. Most of that cloud content goes into the CCSP exam now, though. But you do have to be able to know, like you said, the IaaS, the SaaS, PaaS, PaaS, whatever all those are. Yeah, you still have to know about them. But a lot of that you had to know about for the 2021 version of the exam also. So
There was one mention of the words SDN in the entire test, and that was one. So that had to do with I can't remember now which.
Software-defined networking.
That's it. There was one question on it, and it was an easy question.
That's actually not in the newer one. That's actually in the existing 2021, to my knowledge. One example that's in the 2024, according to Pete Zergert's exam cram video, is FedRAMP, which is the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program. So it's basically, if I understand correctly, a framework for the cloud. It's
a standard. Yeah.
Standard,
it's like PCI DSS. It's like HIPAA. Yeah, it's a standard.
So I got told that might
Is
be
it like the NIST too, or?
Yeah. And I don't know much about FedRAMP because I've just not looked into it. But
I just went through 4 years of getting my infrastructure certified for FedRAMP Medium.
Okay, so you're very, very conversant in FedRAMP.
I'm more aware of it than I should be. Yeah, I never wanted to know FedRAMP as well as I did.
Troviz, do you have a question?
Yeah, sure. So with the ISC 2 study guide, the most recent one, on the chapter exams, and then if you do their online, pick 90 questions, are they actually representative of what's in the exam, or are they completely easy and the exam's a lot harder?
I will parrot what my friend Ben has said many, many times. I've heard him say, there is absolutely no question in any test bank, in any practice test, that comes close to the real exam. Some test banks are more technical. Some test banks are much more wordy. Some test banks just don't follow the correct format. But what Ben has always said, and I'm just repeating what he said, is the real test is so jacked up and uses such word salad and it confuses you so much with the language that it uses. There is no test bank written by a normal human being that even comes close to the real CISSP exam.
Amen to the word salad part.
And I totally agree with that, because there's a Reddit post recently, this week or last week, somebody says it's pretty much a comprehensive exam.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people have complained that it's an English comprehension or a grammar type exam. What I relate it to more is if you're familiar with reading legal forms, so terms of service or legal briefs or documents that have been written by lawyers, a lot of the questions read like those. So they will use very specific words. They'll use very specific phrases, but they're not the phrases and the words that you would necessarily use in normal, everyday, casual conversation like you might see in a practice test bank. Akil, did you have a question?
I just wanted to share this with the group. So FedRAMP, SDN, all these things were also there in 2021 curriculum. So I just completed this all-in-one book, which was like 1,300 pages book. And what I observed is most of the concepts that came up in 2024 were also included in the past books. But all these official study guides or some other guides that people prepare, they were exam focused. So they kind of skipped few things like less priority or low rated topics, and they added all of them in the all-in-one book. So if anyone is following all-in-one, you will find all those terms from the 2021 as well as the 2024 if it was released.
When you fail your exam, this is what it looks like.
Yeah. It lists off your domains, and it'll tell you whether you were above proficiency, below proficiency, or I think there's a third one, marginal or something like that. Yeah. It'll tell you the domains that you got wrong, but it won't tell you the questions, and it won't tell you your exact score either. So you now, I mean, keep in mind though, you can miss. I want to say it's like 30% of the questions and still pass. So, but you have to pass each domain. So you can't miss all 30 questions in 2 domains. You have to spread them out among all the domains to actually be able to pass. But you can miss quite a few questions and still pass this exam.
I actually asked that exact question. I just took a week-long camp. I guess they want to call it that. They didn't like it. But but he even pointed me back to ISC Squared's site where they were very opaque about exactly what you just said. Do you have to pass each domain? And I mean, I read it was like 2 paragraphs that just frankly made no sense. They would not answer that question. But I've had 2 other people say exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm expecting that.
I don't know that I've ever heard it officially, but I've heard it unofficially many times.
Exactly.
that you have to pass all the domains. You can be right on the edge of all the domains, but a pass is a pass.
Yes.
And I've seen a FAQ question in IC Square portal somewhere, but what it mentioned is like if you are above proficiency in, let's say, 5 domains, and then meeting the proficiency in 2 domains, and maybe below efficiency maybe at a very slight edge on the last domain, there is a possibility of you being passed.
As I understand it, if you're below proficiency in even 1 domain, you still don't pass.
Right. But that was something that kind of confused me as well. Like, is this like a valid answer or not? So,
right. And if you pass,
for me.
yeah, and if you pass, they don't tell you where you stood. They don't tell you your score, whether you pass or you fail. But if you pass, you have no idea how you did on each of the domains either. It's only if you fail the test do you actually get the printout of all the domains and whether you were above or below proficiency. Cliff Jenkins, do you have a question?
Yes. I'm a math and science guy.
Mm-hmm.
English was my worst subject. And when it comes to things like policy, procedures, standards, guidelines, and getting those things in order, that's been my concern. And just understanding it's like, well, in everyday English, we usually use these words interchangeably. So I'm trying to get more into the definition of the words and understand those better. And where can I get that from?
Every website that you go to, every piece of software that you have has a terms and conditions or an acceptable use policy or something like that. Read those and get used to reading them.
The EULA?
Yeah, EULAs, any documents with legalese. And I've got a buddy who does this for fun, more or less. He's a really twitchy security guy, but he'll take those EULAs and stuff like that, and he'll feed them into ChatGPT, and he'll say, "Give me a summary of ChatGPT. Tell me, all the high points of this," and then you can see how the legalese is translated to casual, normal English.
I'm also a certified paralegal, so if that's
you're in good shape.
So, okay, so if you're a paralegal, you're already in that legal community and you're used to that type of stuff. But yeah, it all goes back to this is not a technical exam. It's not a science exam. It's not a math exam. It's a policies and procedures. It's a managerial exam. It's thinking like a manager. It's thinking like a consultant. It's thinking like a C-level executive. You're making decisions for an entire organization. You're not the person who picks up the screwdriver and goes and unracks a firewall. You're the person who picks up the telephone and calls the person who picks up the screwdriver and goes and unracks the firewall. You need to always have the 10,000-foot view as the person, as the CISO or whoever, in the context of these questions. You are not the technician. You are not the low-level person writing code. You're the person who's directing those teams that do that type of stuff.
And since 2000, I've usually only reported to the CEO or the board.
Okay. So Cliff, are you a C-level or are you like a manager of some sort already?
Usually an IT manager for the last 20 plus years and IT director briefly, but I've reviewed contracts. I report to the board. I report to my CEO.
Okay. So it sounds like you've got the background already, but yeah, reading the questions, RTFQ, read the flipping question, and read it twice before you answer, and don't click submit until you're sure.
Guys, I'm going to interject for just 1 second. I deeply apologize. I'm going to quietly excuse myself. I'm actually at an annual event at my church. So I'm going to get back to that, but this meeting is going to stay open. I want to thank you in advance, Matthew, and everyone. Let's just be respectful of his time as we come toward the end of the meeting. Again, I put all this together totally for free for us to learn from each other. So if you enjoy it, all I ask is that you share it with another professional who might benefit from it. And other than that, I'll turn it back over. Thank you again.
Thanks, Vincent.
Thank you, Vincent.
Thanks.
Okay, so Jeremy Moran, do you have some?
Yeah, going back to your phrase that you used with the word salad, is there anything we can do for preparation to get used to different type of wording they actually might ask us? Like the source?
The hardest questions out there, use them. Somebody on the website posted something about Luke Ahmed's Think Like a Manager and his question test banks. Luke Ahmed has some of the best questions out there because his are very detailed and they're not word salads, but they are complicated, complex questions. Luke knows how to craft a question to try to mislead you, and that's what CISSP does. There was another one that I used this was like 4 years ago. I'm not even sure if they're still around. I can't think of the name of it. It was some CISSP question bank, and it had the craziest, wordiest, longest, most complex questions out there. Seek those out. The question banks like Boson, I used Boson as well. Boson, what I thought was a great test engine because it looked and felt a whole lot like the real CISSP, but the questions were too easy and the questions were too technical. And so Boson was good for some stuff, but it wasn't good for as a sole source for practicing, questions like would be on the real CISSP.
Were you thinking about Thor hard questions?
It may have been. I can't remember. I wish I could remember. I documented it somewhere a long time ago. I'd have to go back and look it up. But yeah, there are some question banks out there that are intentionally very hard. Yeah, and I know Thor has a group of hard questions as well. So some question banks are just to get the fundamentals down, and some question banks are to try to get you to think the way CISSP wants you to think. Luke Ahmed, Thor's hard ones, those all try to get you to think like the CISSP. And if you're struggling with those, you might want to hammer some more on that before you go and take the real thing, because the real thing will try to confuse you. It'll try to mislead you. It uses distractors. Peter and David, I see, I know you guys have both already taken it. I mean, what were your thoughts on the question structure with CISSP when you guys took it?
One technique I tried to use, and I still use because it seems to work, is if you get to a word salad, meaning you're going to see a whole paragraph right above the question, is read the question and read the answers first. And if you can't answer it, then read the word salad instead of spending the time reading the word salad first. Because really, it's like you're getting a story, and then the last sentence of the story is the actual question. Just skip to the question.
Right. Well, when I took the exam, the questions that I got were all one sentences. There were no word salads. I was really shocked and surprised by it because there's no big word salad in any of the questions that I got.
Okay.
Wow.
And everybody's experience is different. I mean, keep in mind, CISSP doesn't pull from, 1,000 questions. They pull from tens of thousands of questions. So everybody's experience is going to be different. Everybody's exam is going to focus on different domains than other people's. In my experience, this was a really weird coincidence. I'm a professional digital forensic examiner. My test was much more forensics than I expected it to be, which was great for me because it was exactly what I wanted it to be. And I think that contributed a lot to me passing it. But some of them are going to be more on the other domains. On, if it had been more focused on software development, I would have been completely screwed because I'm not a programmer, or not a good one at least. So yeah, everybody's experience is different. Just be aware that those types of questions can be out there. But as David said, if you go through 100 questions and they're all simple, 2-sentence questions, great. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Cliff, I despise SDLC. Yeah, you and me both.
Me too.
Akil,
I was expecting the big long questions when I did my exam, and it really shocked me when I didn't have anything like that.
Yeah, but I mean, and David, I think that it's important to point out though, even if they're short questions, they can still be very mentally fatiguing because you're trying to fit one of the 4 answers into, even if it's just a 2-sentence question, you're trying to fit something that's not ideal, or the 2-sentence ones are sometimes even worse because you want more information, but it's just not there. and you have to make a decision and answer a question without all the information that you would want to have as a person in that real position. And that's one of the hardest things to overcome, is you just got to make the best choice, whether it's, whether they give you all the information, all the data that you want or not.
I think that one gentleman that does a YouTube video, I think he's got a 50 question YouTube video. I forget his name.
That one's a great video.
One thing he mentioned, right? What he mentions in there is if you had to pick one answer and your life depended on it, which one would it be? And that's all you can do, right?
Yeah, exactly. Cliff, the video, are you guys talking about Luke Ahmed? Is that right?
No, I think he's asking about Andrew Ramdale's top 50 questions.
50 hard CISSP practice questions mastered a CISSP mindset.
Share the link here.
That's a good one. I saw this after I did my exam. I wish I saw it before.
Lots of instructors out there do question banks, and they do all the videos and stuff like that. The one thing I like about a lot of the instructors, okay, somebody posted the YouTube link up there in the chat. If you don't have the chat window open, go ahead and pop it, and there's a link in there. The instructors, by and large, come at it from the academic side and not from the real world side, which is important because CISSP is done from an academic standpoint and not from a real world standpoint. So they'll give you real world circumstances, but they want the academic answer, which isn't always. If you have a history of experience, if you're like most of us do, and it's a requirement that you have at least 5 years in cybersecurity to even take this exam and get the certification, you're going to bring all these real world experiences with you, and you're going to be thinking back to, okay, I saw or I did something like this with a Microsoft product or with a VMware product or a Google product or something like that. Oh, I know how to answer this because I did this before. ISC2 doesn't care what you did in the past. They want their academic answer and not the real world answer. Cliff, real world versus academic. Yeah, real world is always the most realistic. So you're going to find yourself sometimes giving a real world answer, and ISC2 doesn't really want that. And you may miss a question because you bring some of that in there. However, I think it is very important to have the breadth and the depth of real world experience behind you. Even if you can't use it to answer questions, it can help you frame your mind and put you in the mindset while you're taking the exam of, okay, I've answered questions like this before because I've done this in my real job. And so lean on that type of stuff because it can help you, and it can, keep the nerves down, because a lot of people go into this and get really nervous also. Akhil, did you have anything else? Or you put your hand up?
So when you said about the question banks comparison, like some go too technical, some go on the twists with the questions. So where do you place the wanna practice questions? Because I enrolled for the wanna practice questions recently.
Well, I'm biased because I know the author, and I did the question review for the first 1,000 questions or so for the wanna practice. So I've seen all the wanna practice questions. Ben is a good guy. Ben has a good heart. Some of the mistakes that he made that I corrected were because he himself is a self-professed academic, and he's not a real world practitioner. I think Ben's questions are good by and large. I think my biggest regret or my biggest gripe with Ben and the wanna practice set, and I've told him this to his face, they're largely too easy. They don't make you. He does make you think critically, but if you, I found the vast majority of them a little bit too easy. They're great for getting the fundamentals down. They're great for making you think. But and I give him a break on this because writing hard questions takes time. Writing hard questions takes practice as a question writer. And he's cranking out his work ethic is he writes 10 questions a day. So he's constantly cranking out new questions. But my biggest criticism of Ben and wanna practice, even though I highly endorse it, and I can give anybody a discount code if they want to get it.
Are you using the 40% discount code?
Yeah, there's a 40% discount code out there. If you listen to our podcast, it's on it as well. Yeah. But yeah, I like Ben, and I like his questions, and I think that he comes at it from. Ben is a classically trained ISC squared instructor, so he taught at ISC2 for a long time, so he knows the way that they want things answered. So he does bring that perspective to it, which some other people don't. And so that's the good side of the want to practice, and the bad side, like I said, I think it's too easy. But that's just me. I just think it's too easy.
Cool. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
That
No
really
problem.
helped.
And I've known Ben for 30 years. So we rib each other like brothers. Yeah. Any other questions any of you guys have? Any other stuff you want to talk about? It doesn't have to be CISSP. Like I said, I'm not an instructor. I don't work for ISC2. I've taken the test though, and I passed it. The one thing I usually tell people is I did not think that the CISSP was the hardest exam I ever took. A lot of people are really nervous about it because they hear how hard it is and how detailed. And we've talked about, the word salads and the question structures and stuff like that. It's not the hardest exam out there. Peter, I think you had mentioned, your VMware exam and a lot of technical exams out there, the technical exams that are vendor specific get very, very hard, very, very detailed. Yes, Cliff, the Cisco ones. I know that Cisco's got levels that are just crazy. Vidya, thank you for hopping on. CISSP is not the hardest exam, but it requires you to be conversant in, like we said, the mile wide and inch deep. You have to be able to talk about so many different things and think about so many different things. And some questions, they're not like about one specific domain per question. Some questions will integrate pieces that you have learned from 2, 3, 4 different domains into it. And that's not to try to mislead you. The question literally just relies on all these other different things. So you have to be able to know about so many different things and bringing all those together when you take the exam. It's a complex exam. It's not the hardest test I've ever taken. It's not the hardest test most of you all will ever take. So don't let it scare you. That being said, it is a slog. It's a marathon. It's up until recently, it was 175 questions. I think it was. Now they brought it back to 150. So if it stops at 100, you've either fully, you aced the exam, or if it stops at 100, you've completely failed it and nothing else is going to help you. The next 50 questions, if it goes past 100, it can go up to 150. It's trying to suss out whether you actually know stuff on questions you may have missed in the first 100. So it's adaptive. It's figuring you out, and if it figures you out sooner than 150 questions, it'll stop the test. So don't let that scare you, though. Give yourself every advantage physiologically. Usually what I tell people is, if you normally eat a big breakfast, the day before you take CISSP, eat a big breakfast. If you normally get 5 hours of sleep, get 5 hours of sleep. If you, don't change your routine for this exam so that you can go into it as if this is just another day at work, because that's what a lot of it is. Just sit down at it and answer questions as if you were at work. Answer them the way ISC2 wants you to. Don't let it scare you. It's a marathon. You will be tired more than likely at the end of it. It's mentally fatiguing. It's going to tax your brain. But go into it knowing that. The other thing is, when I tell people when they're taking practice questions, take practice sets, 5, 10 questions, 25 questions at a time. But before you take the real exam, sit down, block out 3 hours, give yourself a 150 question full-on test, and do it more than once. Do it twice, 3 times. It's a commitment. But what you're doing is you're exercising your brain so that fatigue doesn't cause that brain fog. That when you're taking the real test and you're 100 questions in and you don't know how much further you've got to go, your brain's going to start to want to get tired. You're going to start to make mistakes. Exercise your brain. Keep it in shape before you take this exam, because you're going to get tired. It's not a sprint; it's a marathon. So just keep that in mind. The physiological effects, I think, cause people a lot more problems than they want to admit, because they didn't, fully, take advantage of, okay, I usually fall asleep or I want to take a nap in the afternoon. Don't schedule your test for the afternoon. I'm always bright-eyed and bushy-tailed from 8 a.m. to noon. Take your test then. Take it. Give yourself every advantage that you can before you take this test, because it does help. I saw a comment. Let me switch back over to the thing. Oh, LearnKey gives us access to Boson. Yeah, Boson. I'm not knocking Boson at all. I've talked with the guys at Boson. I think that they're great. My main criticism is that their questions are too technical. They're going to ask you stuff about encryption or DNS or ports or stuff like that. Stuff like that won't appear on the real exam. But aside from that, Boson has the look and feel of the real exam by and large.
No, I'm at the point right now. I'm actually trying to memorize all the different frameworks and steps, and like, ironically, the longest one in there that I can see for this for all the different steps is the forensics one, the evidence life cycle, e-discovery one is 9 steps.
Yeah.
You know, and I've started making mnemonics for all these, but I know you can't say with the NDA, but am I wasting brain cells? Or be prepared to know all this?
I can tell you this. I went in with mnemonics and stuff like that on my test. I'm not saying that every test is like this, but I did not use a single mnemonic device on answering any question when I took the real exam.
You're not the first person I've read or heard that either. So I'm starting
Okay.
to second guess. I'm starting to second question myself.
The important part is knowing the fundamentals and the reasons for all the steps. In other words, step A leads to step B, leads to step C, because there is a sequence that has to occur.
Right.
But you don't have to memorize what all the steps are in that sequence or in any given, the OSI model or anything like that. No, you don't. In other words, you need to be able to talk about it. You need to be able to answer basic questions about a lot of that stuff. But you're not expected to go in and be a forensic examiner to answer.
But for example, like incident response, the drum roll phases, like the mitigation step, it's probably good to know that that's where you contain.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of that is just common sense, knowing that, okay, if you have an incident, what comes first, what comes second, what comes third, like, the lessons learned obviously is going to be the very last thing in that sequence. But knowing, where some of those other things come into play. And if you've ever actually worked a real incident, you know how you need to manage an incident. And even if you haven't worked a real incident, you can kind of visualize in your head, okay, this needs to happen before that, because otherwise this step doesn't make any sense. So knowing the reasoning behind it is the bigger picture, and that's the bigger thing you need to know, and less about memorizing the first letter of each step so that you can spit it back out. This is not a memorization test. Right. It's not, it's a, can you work in the real world in cybersecurity and handle something that may occur? That's what it is.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? I'm, happy to talk about forensics. I've got lots of stuff with that. I mean, I'm happy to talk about.
I would like
anything.
Might know more about that. I actually used to do a little bit of that at work through another coworker in our ISO department, Information Security Office, where you actually had like a write blocker device when you made a copy and clone of the hard drive. We used this piece of software called Encase, and one of the questions I was going to ask right now, is just because you'll have the knowledge, is Encase still well reputable software suite, or is there something bigger and better now these days? This was years ago. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Encase is, everybody hates Encase. I'll tell you that.
Okay. That's the answer.
But Encase is the quote unquote gold standard for forensic software.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
And it remains that way. And Encase created the standard for creating forensic images. So whenever you grab a copy of a hard drive, you create an image.
Yep.
Something you need to know for the CISSP. Do you know the difference between a copy, a backup, and an image? Forensics guys work with images. We never work with backups. But yeah, Encase created the standard for creating forensic images. And so they are well known and well trusted by the courts. I do testimony under oath, in addition to obviously doing the actual work of writing reports, doing the examinations and all that kind of stuff. Have testified in court. Encase is the standard. It's not got the cachet that it used to 20 years ago, but it's still really well known. That being said, other stuff, magnet forensics, Gray Key, Celebrite. There are other softwares that have come around that have completely eclipsed Encase, mostly because they're quicker, they're easier to use, they're easier to get somebody trained up on. Encase is a very technical piece of software, and it's not difficult to use, but it requires a lot of work to get it to do what you want it to do. Whereas all these other new softwares are it's like going from WordPerfect 5.1 for any of us old timers out there, where it was text on the screen and you had to have the function keys. to Word 2004 or 2024, where everything is on a ribbon and everything is, just right there. All the new forensic software out there does all that stuff so much nicer and so much easier. And I've worked alongside forensics professionals where we're working on the same case, but we're on opposite sides because we do interact. And I see some of the software sometimes that they use, and I'm jealous because I'm like, oh, that's a cool new toy. Oh, I wish I had that. Because by the way, I'm in Kentucky. I didn't say that before. I'm in Lexington, Kentucky, which is not exactly a bastion of cybersecurity and forensics, but Lexington has two forensics firms, and I am the forensic examiner at one firm, and then there's the other firm, and we've had cases against each other. But I know all the guys. We're friendly with each other. We have beers with each other. We just can't talk about cases that we have against each other. And they've got some really cool toys because they're a bigger firm. They've got more examiners. They've got bigger budgets. They also charge their clients a lot more than we charge ours, which I think maybe we need to start upping our rates so we can afford some of the cool toys that they have. But yeah, Ncase still the gold standard, quickly becoming not, but it's like who's going to knock the Ford F-150 out of the number one selling car spot in America. It's so entrenched. No one's going to do it anytime soon. It will happen at some point. And the same with Ncase. It will happen at some point, just not quite yet. Ncase also suffered from being bought by, they were originally guidance software. Now they're owned by a company called OpenText. OpenText has not put any effort into making Ncase any better. Not to turn this into a rant about Ncase, but OpenText has done no favors to the forensics community with how they've been handling Ncase. Cliff, just saw your message. You should have to know to jump in position. So hard in documentation because who may get it hits by a bus tomorrow. Yeah, Cliff, the redundancy in IT positions, that's a big thing because we see that a lot. And part of what CISSP is about is making positions redundant, so that if someone gets hit by a bus or dies for some reason or gets sick or ill tomorrow, the entire company doesn't get shut down because all the knowledge was in one person. I walked in several medical positions where all I was given was the admin password, no documentation. Yeah, gosh, I've done that so many times. Token Ring was going through this or that. Yeah, I'd like to learn a good plan to present C-level and what they really need to know. Talking to C-levels, you got to put it when you're talking to in real world. When you're talking to presidents, vice presidents, CEOs, CFOs, you've got to put it in terms that they understand, and it almost always comes down to money. And if you can present a case of why you need something or why something should change, the biggest reason to do something is if there's a dollar value assigned to it and a risk level assigned to it, which is part of what you cover in CISSP, is going over stuff like risk assessments, the ARO, blah blah blah, all those formulas and stuff like that. Part of the reason that they do that is because you're going to be going to people that only understand numbers and don't understand bits and bytes. If you can understand how to translate something into a budget, what the financial cost of something is, what the financial risk there is of doing something or not doing something, that makes it a lot more understandable to the C-suite, the people who are actually setting these budgets and making decisions.
The total cost of ownership.
Right. Yeah. All those 3-letter acronyms that I learned for the CISSP, and then I immediately forgot all of them. Tro, thank you very much for joining us. She just left. But yeah. Other questions? You mentioned write blockers. Write blockers are a standard thing. You probably should know that for CISSP, that a write blocker is a standard thing. It's a real thing. It's a piece of hardware we plug a hard drive into, so that when we're doing our examination or our forensic image capture, we don't make any changes to the original evidence. We don't want to. There are instances where we can't use write blockers, and the way we get around that is by documenting. We document everything as much as we can. Write blockers are a standard thing. Chain of custody is another big thing to know for CISSP. One of my questions that I posted on the website was about chain of custody. Chain of custody means that a piece of evidence has not left your care, and the reason for that is if someone else can get their hands on a piece of evidence like a hard drive, they can hook it up to their computer, make some changes to it, and then it goes back into your hands without you even necessarily knowing that they did anything to it. Chain of custody has been broken. That evidence is no longer reliable. And that's a big problem, especially if you go to something like trial, because if you've got me on the other side and chain of evidence or chain of custody has been broken, you better bet I'm telling my retaining counsel, hammer them on chain of custody, because that evidence is now no longer admissible. You don't want to go up against me in a court case about forensics, because I will tell my lawyer everything that they need to do to nail you to the wall.
And it's true statement too, Matt, where if you never shut down a PC before you try to capture what's in the memory and all that stuff.
If at all
Right.
possible, yes. Now, again, real world, that's not always possible. Sometimes you get a piece of evidence that's already been shut down. Real world, though, yeah, if there is a chance, especially if it's an incident where we're doing something like incident response, something like a ransomware or some other type of malware or some kind of a breach, the best response is always do not shut it down. Quarantine it and then grab an image of it, because you want what's in the RAM. You want what's in that volatile memory, because there can be important bits and bytes and executables. And I've even seen cases in ransomware where the ransomware decryption key was still in RAM. Guess what? We captured the RAM. We got the decryption key. We didn't have to pay the bad guys. So stuff like that. Yeah, that's the reason why you don't want to shut it down, because there can be valuable information, valuable evidence, valuable artifacts in RAM. And so if you shut it down, that RAM's gone. Looking through some of these other things. Security governance and assessment questions, wordings were different and too difficult. How to tackle those? Security governance and assessment questions. I don't have a good answer for that. Those are going to be difficult. Yeah, governance, compliance, any of that type of stuff. I'm not a GRC person. Governance, I forget what the R is. Governance, something, and compliance. Risk and compliance, is that what it stands for? GRC. There are GRC people out there.
Yeah,
Governance,
risk and compliance.
Governance, risk, and compliance. Thank you. I'm not a GRC person. I do a lot of risk assessments. I don't have a good answer for how difficult those questions are. They tend to be wordy. I mean, if you get a chance, go out and get some example security risk assessment forms. Get a SOC 2 questionnaire, get a PCI DSS questionnaire, and familiarize yourself with the types of questions that those ask. Because some of the questions that they ask are technical, but by and large, the questions that they ask are policy and procedure. In other words, do you have a policy for HIPAA, for instance? And I realize I'm American, and so I'm America-centric. The HIPAA policy for medical records and stuff like that. There are sections of it that are technical, but a lot of them are, do you have documentation about X, Y, and Z? So get familiar. Go look up real-world examples of that type of stuff and get familiar with them. Cliff, the pic that you see when I worked at INE, working from one location to another, setting up all their 22. Oh yeah, Cliff, is that your picture of your avatar? So Cliff, apparently you are a pretty technical person. Yeah, the one thing about if you're coming up through the ranks of the technical stuff, if you've done other technical exams, if you're into, VMware, if you're a cloud engineer, if you're a programmer, if you came up through help desk, you may have done other certification exams. CISSP is not like any of those. It's assuming that you are not the technical person, that you're the person who is the boss of the technical person. So just keep that in mind. Any other questions? We're coming up. I've got about 10 more minutes, then I've got to go put a kid to bed. Any other questions, though? Anything else you want to talk about? I'm happy to, feel free to engage with me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm really easy to find. I think that I'm on the group. There's a LinkedIn group that Vinny started. You can find me through there. If you can just search for my name. My last name is really unique. Snoddy, Snotty. It's pronounced Snotty. It sounds like something that comes out of your nose. I realize it. I've heard it all my life. I'm fine with it, but I'm really easy to find. If you do pass, or when you do pass your CISSP, you will be required to earn CPEs, continuing education credits. A lot of people you have 3 years to get 120 hours of CPEs. A lot of people come up on their 3 years and they realize they don't have enough CPEs to renew their CISSP. I'll give you a really quick and easy and dirty way to get CPEs, and that is listen to podcasts. And I'll plug my podcast, and Sensuous Sounds of InfoSec. It's an hour a week. We talk about information security. We talk about current events. Sometimes we do deep dives on stuff like CISSP and test taking, other stuff like that. Easy way to get CPEs. Once you get your CISSP certification, or if you have other continuing education requirements for other certifications you have, listening to podcasts, attending conferences, speaking at conferences, all of those count for stuff. Watching YouTube videos, those all count as continuing education credits.
Do you know if, well, you might have just answered with the YouTube videos, but do you know if just working during your regular work hours, assigned to project work, researching new technology, like researching new solutions, can that go towards CPE?
That does not count towards CPEs. And you can ask ISC2 specifically, but they have guidance on what counts as a CPE and what does not. CPEs in general cannot be related to your actual job.
Okay.
So if it's something that you did for your real job that your employer is paying for, no, it doesn't count. But if it's a conference that your employer sends you to, that does count. Or if it's something that you do on your own time, that counts. And they're not hard to get. It's 40 hours a year for 3 years that gets you to the 120. I hit my 120 CPEs in like 18 months or something like that. They're not hard to get, especially if you're active in the community. Posting on a CISSP board. I've already fulfilled all my CPEs, so I'm not claiming any for doing this type of stuff. But I could, take this hour that I'm talking to you guys and claim that as a CPE. There are lots of creative ways to do it.
Webinars.
Webinars, absolutely.
All sorts.
There's a company called Bright Talk that is nothing but webinars that you can just sit there and watch and get CPEs for.
And they'll spam you.
Yeah, they will. But that's the price you pay. If you go to a conference, they'll spam you too. So yeah, kind of winding down. Any other questions? Any other comments? Anything anybody wants to say? Anybody that's got any?
I got a suggestion for Sarvanan. If you are having trouble with the first domain, particularly related to governance or understanding those different frameworks that you have to remember, I would suggest go with Pete Zerger's YouTube video. It's 8 hours and covering all the domains. So he doesn't explain you regarding the frameworks, but he will explain you the key points, like which framework is useful in which scenario. So that might be really helpful for the exam.
Who's that again? Sorry, Pete? Was it Pete Zergers?
Pete
Zerger.
Zerger.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
He's got a different name for his YouTube series, but yeah.
Inside Cloud Security is what YouTube is.
I will tell you one thing, right? Even though you study all those things, like when you appear the exam, none of those will be coming in exam. That's why I'm struggling, right? You can tell all of this, because I took the exam. The wordings they're talking about, I don't find any of the speech checkers, even in the OSG.
Yeah, keep in mind a lot of that training is to get the fundamentals solidified in your head. Because it's kind of like when you're learning a sport, when you first learn how to play soccer and you're learning to just dribble the ball back and forth between your 2 feet. You're never actually going to do that in a real game, but it's teaching you that muscle memory to get you ready for the next step and then the next step. These are all fundamentals that you're building on. And that's the same way with CISSP. You build on a lot of fundamentals, even though you may not actually use them in the real exam. You're getting that muscle memory in your brain from learning all these different frameworks and different types of GRC stuff. So, okay. If nobody else has anything else, I'm gonna bounce out. If you guys want to stick on and keep on talking, you're more than welcome to. Vinny,
thank you for your time, Matthew.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. My pleasure. And I'm on the website. If any of you guys, just shoot me a message. I get an email whenever anybody mentions me. So I'm happy to hop on and answer if anybody has a question. Oh, somebody had asked a question about pen testing. We didn't talk about pen testing. The person who asked that, I don't remember who asked that question. Peter Kuzinski asked something about pen testing, but he's not on here. I'll answer him directly on the thing. Pen testing doesn't come into a whole lot of play on CISSP in my experience, but you do need to know what the difference is between a pen test, aka a penetration test, vulnerability assessment, and a risk assessment are. Three different things, three different outcomes. He'd asked her if a pen test would find if a VLAN was active on a network. And the answer is it depends, like most things. It depends on how. I'm
For
sorry.
example, to put me on the spot, the pen test, the difference between that and a vulnerability test is you have exploit fees.
Right. Yeah, pen test, depending upon your agreed upon rules with the pen tester at the beginning of the engagement, they could go as far as actually penetrating your network and then trying to exploit other things on your servers and your network and stuff like that. Whereas a vulnerability assessment is usually just a surface level thing that tells you stuff like open ports and open services and stuff like that. So. But yeah, real world, all those answers depend because every engagement is different whenever you talk to a pen tester or a vulnerability assessor. So, anybody got anything else? If not, I'll see y'all online.
Yeah, I just added you on LinkedIn. I followed you.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, feel free to, like I said, and I know a lot of people in the CISSP training community. Ben Malso is one. Luke Ahmed, I've had some interactions with. Prashant Mohan. If you're familiar with any of his documents, he does one called Cirrus, and he does another one. I think not the Sunflower, but he did a different one. He's really big in CISSP and CCSP. Friend me and you'll be opened up to a whole world of other LinkedIn ISC2 people, I guess.
Yeah.
So, all right. Cool. Thanks, you guys. I really appreciate it. Really enjoyed it. And like I said, if you need anything else, feel free to reach out.
Nice to meet you. Hey, I'm Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure to
You're welcome.
meet you.
See y'all.
Have a great night.
You at CISSP too, or
Nope, out here.
you okay?
Yeah.
He's moving there though. We're
Yeah.
moving in together.
He's getting me out there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Like downtown or what?
We're gonna try to rent a house, so wherever we can.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Some good spots down there. Yeah. So, my mom's over on St. Pete's side. It's
Okay.
funny. It's like in the neighborhoods. It's funny. Like in Tampa, we were talking. I don't know why this is. In Tampa, like they're tearing down houses to rebuild all the time.
Right.
Yeah. St. Pete. Nothing.
No, you're right. That's interesting. Yeah.
There's no rebuilds. It's
Right.
just that's interesting. Yeah, they remodel them, and they're the old bungalows. And I don't know if there must be some
So
build.
zoning or
I
something,
don't
maybe?
know why that is. But
Historic area.
Could
it's
be.
not even historic though.
No,
like
really.
I'm talking about like just like 35th Street and like way up. Not
Interesting.
even. Yeah, it's really interesting. But anyway, my wife's leaving.